Was Windows 3.1 really that bad? Let's find out. Windows 3.1 was released in April of 1992 to consumers, and the workgroups version was released around 1993 for, as you may have guessed, workgroups. Windows 3.1 was a radical departure from previous iterations of Windows, in the sense that the user interface was refreshed and changed, and various more features and functions were added, and while quite dated compared to what came later, Windows 95 and later, 3.1 was actually revolutionary for its time. However, unlike modern PCs, back in the early 90s, computers were making leaps and bounds in terms of development and advancements. Windows 3.1 allowed many to have an easier-to-navigate system that was quite customizable in terms of aesthetics. Windows 3.1 was the first to have many new themes introduced or bundled with it. That was a huge improvement upon Windows 3.0, as users could now make their OS a particular color or theme. Customization was and still is a big deal for lots of people, but let's not just focus on this. The hardware aspect was also rapidly improving. Windows 3.1 could run on lots of hardware developed and released around 1991 and later. However, installing it was a big and tedious process, as you had to flip through many floppy disks in order to progress through the installation process. This was abandoned and no longer feasible when CDs and DVDs allowed for installation of operating systems on PCs, which made floppy disks obsolete from there on. However, Windows 3.1 is based on MS-DOS, a disk-type operating system directly run from a floppy disk, and since Windows was DOS-based up until Windows XP, you always needed to install a fresh copy of MS-DOS before installing Windows 3.1, 95, or 98. However, 3.1 was not met with all positivity. Many disliked the File Explorer, which to say the least does look somewhat confusing compared to the revamped File Explorer first seen in Windows 95. 3.1 was a lot more involved to navigate and access files or programs. Many programs were also run off of CD-ROMs back in the day, as the internet was barely a thing in the 1990s, and not many people had access to the World Wide Web, so getting CDs was often the way of purchasing software and operating systems, as well as video and music for entertainment. Windows 3.1 was around during a much different time period for PCs, one that would never be seen again. A time when CDs, floppy disks, and spinning hard drives were all the rage, and Windows 3.1 was a system that heavily lacked in plug-and-play. This was first introduced with Windows 98 and more improved upon in Windows 2000, but before that, users had to manually adjust hardware using the built-in control panel in Windows 3.1, which was a rather complex process and tedious for some users. This is where Windows 3.1 was not an improvement upon previous iterations. For new sound cards, graphics cards, or any new hardware, you had to not only install the correct software, which often came on a CD, you would then have to navigate through the exhaustive list of drivers and install the correct one made for your specific device, which was often hard for less tech-savvy users. And, unlike today, you could not just jump on the web to find an answer to your issue. You had to consult hardware manufacturers, or at least ask somebody who knew about PCs enough to troubleshoot problems to fix whatever problem you had. And while it was a significant improvement upon its predecessor, it had some shortcomings, as every version does. Overall, the improvements in the Windows operating system far outweighed the disadvantages. However, there were areas where 3.1 could have done a lot better, such as in hardware management, and the user interface could have been designed to be easier to navigate. However, you have to remember that 3.1 was a significant milestone in the history of Windows, because it introduced many things we take for granted, like multimedia support, true type fonts, and the interface was certainly better than the ones in Windows 3.0 or older. So, was Windows 3.1 really that bad? Not by a long shot. It was revolutionary, just like all the so-called bad versions of Windows. Millennium Edition maybe not so much, but Vista was a radical improvement and change upon XP. 8 was a big departure from desktop computers to mobile devices and tablets, and 11 is yet to be considered good or bad, but the negative connotation surrounding it will likely put it into the bad category. But even 11 has some good features, as much as I hate to admit that, because I hate Windows 11 with a huge passion. Windows 3.1 was a radical and appropriate step in the right direction. Windows was going to dominate the consumer and business industry quite quickly. It excelled compared to Apple's Mac OS, and in the 90s, Apple was not doing well. In fact, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Microsoft notably gave them a lot of money in 1997 and had an agreement or partnership with Apple for 5 years, up until 2003. This is why Internet Explorer was included in early versions of OS X, but that's a story for another video. What did you think of Windows 3.1? Did you like it or not? Let us all know down in the comments section below. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now.